Okay, out of courtesy to the people who are here, we'll start. And let me start by saying there are literally hundreds of books on Kahn. And there are dozens of books on Venturi. And I think these are the most important. So, Venturi launched his career with his mother's house that we'll look at in this book, Complexity and Contradiction. It's published by the Museum of Modern Art with introductions by Vincent Scully, leading historian, and Arthur Drexler, curator of MoMA's architecture division. So it's very prestigious and launched massive controversies. Venturi and his wife, Denise Scott Brown, we'll get to in a minute, did other books, but most important other book is Learning from Las Vegas. We'll talk more about that next week. Now there are a dozen books on the work of the firm. The best one is Out of the Ordinary. So 20-some years ago, the Philadelphia Museum did an exhibit of comprehensive work of the office. And this is the catalog with essays by key historians who are key Venturi commentators. I'm not charging here. Here we go. Now, one of the things that, and when I say Venturi, I don't always mean Robert Venturi. I might mean the firm, so we'll get to that in a minute. But one of the things Venturi stands for is appreciation of popular culture. One of the key figures in the office was Steve Eisenhower. He wrote a book, White Towers, the stupid little hamburger chain. You wouldn't think that a serious architect would be interested. They are. So that's just one example of the popular culture interest. We're going to see a lot more very cool stuff as we go. So let's back up. So we're starting today on Venturi, and we're going to look at the early work. Now this is Louis Kahn, Kimball Museum. It evokes Rome, seriousness, high culture. This is Exeter Library. It evokes seriousness, a Roman bath, a monastery. He used the term, it should be a monastic place of study. What's wrong with that? Loosen up, Lou, there are teenagers here. This is school for kids. So, no architect is perfect. Architects choose what they're going to address. And maybe Kahn does not do as good a job as he should in addressing popular culture. So let's see what we get from Venturi. So review. Key ideas of Kahn. Structure as a giver. Let me get my laser pointer. Structure is a giver of architectural order. Now, order with a lowercase o. Oh, by the way, I still have to put up last week's slides on Canvas, but I recorded last week's lecture. It's on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube and find John Lobell's channel, it's the first video that'll come up. So I'm recording this one too. Hopefully it'll work, and I'll be able to put it up as well. But you are welcome to take pictures of the slides. Structure is a giver of order. Now, not the capital O order, but just how the architecture works. Clarity of construction. Forms from Rome. No applied ornament or historical details. Spirituality. What we're going to see from Venturi and Scott Brown. Complexity and contradiction. Context. Signs, symbols, we'll distinguish between them. Yes, the use of applied ornament and historical details. Interest in popular culture. But both produce a didactic architecture. Most of Kahn's buildings are pretty good. Some of Venturi's, maybe you wouldn't get that excited about the building, but they're great ideas. So in both cases, each building is meant to be a lesson about some important aspect of architecture. In contrasting them, who can tell me what we're looking at here? School of Athens, Raphael, the Vatican. And in the center are Plato and Aristotle. Plato is pointing up to the realm of ideal forms. That's the way Kahn thinks. Aristotle is pointing to this world here and now. There are no ideal forms. There's just this real world. And maybe Kahn is Plato and Venturi is Aristotle. Now, Venturi's early work is done on his own. But then he starts dating and eventually marries Denise Scott Brown. And they claim the work is, after that is totally collaborative. They're equal partners. Although she had a strong background in city planning, maybe she contributed more to the planning and urban design than he to the architectural details. Some scholar will have to sort that out. Venturi is an American from an Italian family. Grew up in Philadelphia. The family had a meat packing business. They produced specialty meats for Italian delis. Venturi's father died. He and his mother ran the business. He had money from the business. It's very expensive to launch an architectural career. It's easier today because there are grants. There weren't any grants in those days. So if you want to enter a competition, in terms of paying people to work on the project, getting the model built, just getting reproductions made of the drawings, might be $10,000. Where are you guys going to get $10,000 to enter a competition? So Venturi had those resources. During the day, he ran the family business. At night, he did the architecture, and he also taught at Penn. Denise Scott Brown was born in Rhodesia, Southern Africa. Her family moved to South Africa. When it was time for school, she said, I got to get out of here. The apartheid, racism in South Africa is very ugly. She went to London and studied at the AA, Architectural Association. While there, she was saying, well, what do I do next? And her professors told her, if you want to study architecture, you want to go to Penn and study with Kahn. So, and she got married to Scott Brown. I don't remember what her name was. The two of them went to Philadelphia. He got killed in an automobile accident. So then she was a widow. She and a student. Her advisor said, don't focus on Kahn. Take courses in planning as well. She was very bright and started teaching while she was still a student. And she became a bridge between architecture and planning. So she taught basic design to the city planners, and she taught city planning to the architects. She discovered pop culture. When she left Penn, she went to teach in California, started photographing Los Angeles, Las Vegas, the Southwest. Now, Las Vegas was held in contempt. It was discovered by Tom Wolfe, pop culture writer, and the Venturis. Oh my God, they never in a million years would have occurred to me to go to Las Vegas. Bunch of fat women in spandex, spandex sweatpants, putting quarters in slot machines. All of a sudden, maybe there's something cool here. So on one of my trips to California, for no extra money coming home to New York, could stop in Las Vegas, grab a taxi, and go look at, wow. So they discovered Las Vegas and popular culture in general. Talk more about that later. So this is a really good book on Denise, and she's co-author with Venturi and Steve Eisenhower, who did that White Towers book of learning from Las Vegas. Now, it doesn't say we should imitate Las Vegas. They're saying there are things we can learn from Las Vegas. So it's controversial to say Venturi. Do I mean Venturi or Venturi and Denise Scott Brown? So I'm going to usually say Venturi, but it might mean the office. Now, the office has an evolving history. So he was on his own from 57 to 60. It was then Venturi and Short. Then it was Venturi and Rauch. Then Venturi, Rauch, and Scott Brown after 1980. Then Venturi, Scott Brown, Rauch left. And there's a firm, VSBA, that is a successor firm. So Venturi has died and Denise is in her 90s, so they don't There's no firm anymore. So here are their dates. Bob just died 4 years ago. Denise is still alive. As soon as this COVID blows over, I'll go visit her. They live in a really cool house outside Philadelphia. So, how do we approach Venturi? And I'm going to start with the notion that I notice often an artist will lay down in their early work what they will do for the rest of their career. You find hints of their mature work in their earliest work. So, James Joyce produced 3 novels, the 2 great novels, Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake. But he announces in his first novel, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, what he's going to do. You find the whole project outlined there. Elvis Presley had a spectacular career, but really it's all there in the Sun recordings. Anybody see the new movie on Elvis? Highly recommend it. Find out what it was about. But Sun Records was a small record label in Memphis. And to make extra money, there are no tape recordings, tape players in those days, no tape cassettes. So you could cut a record. So Sam Phillips owned Sun Records. Elvis went in to record a birthday greeting for his mother. His secretary called up Sam Phillips and said, "You better get over here right away." And it's all there in the Sun recordings. He then goes to RCA, becomes one of the biggest stars of all time, and then sums up in Elvis, from Elvis in Memphis, sort of outlines the arc of his career and what he contributed to music. It's all laid down in 6 recordings. Mondrian, it's already hinted at in landscapes that he did, trees, where we start seeing the emphasis on the vertical and the horizontal. Here is Frank Lloyd Wright's Skyscraper, Price Tower, 1953. Here we are 60 years earlier, Romeo and Juliet Windmill, 1893, and it already announces the folded plate. He's not going to do a rectangular grid of columns. He's always against that. It's like the trunk of a tree or folded plate fins. Here's Falling Water, 1936. And everybody is blown away. Oh my God, something shockingly new. So what do you mean shockingly new? I already did it in 1906 in the Gale House. Exact same configuration. There's the anchor, lower deck, upper deck roof, lower deck, upper deck roof, cantilever, cantilever. It's all there. 1959, the Guggenheim. 1909, Unity Temple. Major space, minor space, entrance in between, balcony running around the space, skylight in the middle. skylight in the middle. So, project for a beach house, 1959, we can go home. It's all here. That's all there is cardboard model and a plan in a section. Never got built. Now, Venturi, in the Complexity and Contradiction book, everything I'm showing you is from that book. The beginning of the book is, first 3/4 of the book, is his theory of complexity and contradiction. And we'll get to that later. Then the last quarter is examples of his work. He describes it in terms of complexity and contradiction. Look at how convoluted, complex his plan is. Later he's to say, too complex for such a small house. But perhaps more important is the imagery, so we'll get to that. Now, when Venturi does this, 1959, here's what's going on. Here's Tugendhat House by Mies van der Rohe, 2930. The archetypal international style house. White, rectilinear, lots of glass. Sort of the residential version of Mies's Barcelona Pavilion. Open plan, flowing space, etc. Picking up on that, early 50s is Mies van der Rohe's Farnsworth House, now in this country. So Mies comes here. And in the late 40s, early 50s, the dominant American house is coming from Mies, Corbu, and Gropius, Europeans. So the American architects, Philip Johnson, Marcel Breuer from the Bauhaus, but now in the United States, John Johansson used to teach at Pratt. This is what houses were looking like. This is what you're supposed to do. Instead, Venturi's doing this. Now, where does this come from? There's an American modern tradition, the Shingle Style. So the Shingle Style developed in the late 1800s. It's called shingle because not only are the roofs shingle, but the side of the house is shingles. And Venturi is looking back at that instead of looking back at Europe, Mies, Corbu, Gropius. It's a total revolution, going from here to here. It takes a while for anybody to start to notice, but these shingle style houses are very popular today. All over New England, people are building them. Now, for each project, I'm going to end with concept addressed. What is the didactic intent of this project? To revive an interest in American historical context. He's doing the houses in northeastern United States. This is the tradition of northeastern United States. Next project, 1958. Now you notice the career is getting off the ground slowly. We've done a cardboard model. Now we get to do a renovation. So this is called the Duke House. It's owned by NYU, and it's where their History of Art department is located. And it's in, not sure the exact address, would be in the, maybe in the 80s off Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. And it's, Fifth Avenue was covered with Gilded Age mansions. So the rich robber barons would build elaborate houses in Manhattan. There are only a handful left because the property became too valuable. They tear the house down, put up an apartment building, and make a lot of money. The few that are left tend to be galleries, consulates, charitable foundations. So NYU's Duke House. So we have a Beaux-Arts classical revival building. He's doing a renovation. Now, the budget is limited, but still, he does something absolutely radical. He leaves the building alone. Any other architect in 1958 would have put sheetrock. There's this elaborate Beaux-Arts ornament here. Would have sheetrocked over it. And Denise said, I would have at least painted it white. But they just left it alone. He just doesn't touch it. Everything he does is put into the space, not disturbing the original architecture. Totally radical idea. Here in the offices, you would say, well, I want to use birch veneer 5-ply plywood, an elegant high-end material. No, he uses, I'm going to say a word that won't ring a bell for you, but Goldsmith catalog. It's like Staples. He uses Staples prefab metal shelving. Cheap standard office furniture. So it's got these posts and then clip-in shelves. And he does not build them into the walls. He puts these little spacers here to separate it from the original architecture, to minimalize his intervention. Now, we need architecture. I mean, where's the architecture? Is it just commercial shelves? The light fixtures are these huge oversized lampshades. They become a minimalist sculptural form, just as minimalism was about to start happening in sculpture. Then for furniture, well, shouldn't we have a Mies chair? Should we have something stainless steel and modern? No, he has a Thonet bent wood chair. But Thonet bent wood is the beginning of industrial age mass-produced office furniture or commercial furniture. That's what it is. And Corbeau uses it in a pavilion in the 30s. This is sometimes called a Corbeau chair. He didn't develop it, but he used it. So, stupid little minimalist renovation, putting forward a whole revolution in architecture. So, concepts addressed: preservation and restoration. The idea that you go into an existing building and you find a way to make it useful for today, but that respects and preserves the original architecture. That became big 10 years later when we lost Penn to Pennsylvania Station, Penn Station. It was like Grand Central Station, but they tore it down. When that happened, we got all the laws. Like this building, we cannot change the exterior of this building. It's in a preservation neighborhood. The building itself is not preserved, but the neighborhood is. So we cannot touch the exterior. And we needed special permission for the Stephen Hall addition. That way of thinking originates here. He's inventing it. Respect for architectures. I deliberately made that a large S. Architectures. Modernism is not, you can have good and bad modernism. The thinking at the time was modern is good, traditional is bad. Venturi says, no, they can be good and bad traditional, they can be good and bad modern. This is a totally revolutionary idea. Now, I'll talk more about this, but as a student of Bob's and one of the first people to review his book, Complexity and Contradiction, I was a bit outspoken in the late 60s in New York. You have to understand architecture is a religion. So if you do something that's not the thing, you're an apostate. You can get excommunicated. In fact, on the Seagram building, there are those, Mises Seagram building, there are the mullions, are bronze little I-beams that stick out. They give the exterior a nice texture. That's applied ornament. You can't do that. Mises was in trouble. He was about to get excommunicated, and he says, oh no, they're there for wind bracing. Oh, okay. Then it was okay. So, doing something revolutionary, if I would mention Venturi's name in an architectural meeting, there were architects who went on the verge of bursting a blood vessel. One of my buddies from college became a prominent figure in Hollywood. And we're walking around New York, he says, let me explain architecture to you, Lobell. Any old building is better than any new building. And the more you look around, the more you realize maybe it's true. Okay, what kind of work do you get as a beginning architect? How about a renovation of a brownstone for a diner? Mike's, a block from here, was redone years ago by one of the deans of architecture, Constantine Corrales. So we've got 2 row houses. Grand's was there, but they're moving to a new location. They got the ground floors of 2 row houses, going to renovate them to make their restaurant. So we have bearing wall, and we can punch only, this is a bearing wall, so we can only punch limited holes through it. So right away, he's committed a major sin, which is what? A sign, a commercial sign. You see drive-in on Corbu's buildings, on Mises buildings, on Frank Lloyd Wright's. You can't put a sign on modern architecture. That's commercial. We don't do commercial. They're evil. People are going to go spend money? What's that about? That's capitalist. We're socialists. We're against money. We're against commercial, consumerism. We're against commerce. And maybe a discreet sign, but that big and a stupid coffee cup in the middle of it? In the meantime, the medical towers are going up. And after coming from Europe to look at the medical towers, architects from all over the world then walk 2 blocks to look at grants. It's starting, something's going on at Penn. Now, tell me, can anybody tell me what typeface those letters are? Corbu stencils. Before press type and computers, how did you make letters? You could do them by hand, or you had stencils. You had a set of metal, the alphabet, in several sizes. Very expensive because you'd have to get, how many, there's 20-something letters, probably 30 or maybe 100 uppercase, lowercase punctuation. So we all had Corbu stencils. So these are Corbu's letter designs. And then color. Now there are very few good photographs of the building. This is it. Now we're inside. We want to decorate the space. What's the cheapest way to put ornament on a wall? Paint. Right here, Grand's Restaurant. I'm not sure if this is going backwards or the slide is flipped. But this has just invented something that's long gone, but became huge in the 70s, super graphics. So it'd be in the subway and it'd be 42nd Street, and the 4 is as high as the wall. We had them all over the building here years ago. So he invented super graphics. The lighting fixtures are warehouse industrial lighting fixtures. Beautiful form. Simple, clear, beautiful. And now we got all these tables going all the way back. Ketchup, salt and pepper, sugar. Boom, 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 boom. Minimalist sculptural form. The sides of the booths are sculptures, flat, two-dimensional sculptures. And we have repeated similar items to the point of boredom. The modern musician John Cage says, if you find 2 minutes boring, it might just be beep. 2 minutes of that, you're bored. He says, well, then try it for 4 minutes. You're still bored, try it for 8 minutes. So Venturi's picking up on that idea. Complexity. We come in here, and the door, it's like really tedious negotiating to get in here. So, concepts addressed. The sign in architecture, supergraphics, the ordinary, slightly out of context. Sugar, ketchup, salt, and pepper. But so many of them, they start to become boring and then interesting. And again, bentwood Thone chairs. So far he's had a restaurant renovation. Visiting nurse headquarters. So this is a company that you need a nurse to come to your house. You call them up, they have a roster, and I need somebody to watch my family member from 2 to 4 weekdays. So they arrange it. So this is their headquarters. So it's a stupid little building. And I've never been there, so this is the only photograph I have that shows the neighboring building. You can see Mies would make a glass box, assuming they could afford Mies. Venturi does something that's in the vocabulary of the neighborhood, respecting the context. And then there's a sculptural play. We have the positive form of the building and the negative cutout from the hill of the parking lot. So this play of positive and negative. So he's doing very sophisticated architectural things. Where's the entrance? It's where the arch is. That's not enough. He has a pediment. These have nothing to do with the architecture. They're stuck on to announce entrance. Now look at this here. What is this? It's molding. Why is it there? To scale up the window so that it relates to the larger window above. Applied ornament. The biggest sin in modern architecture. You cannot do that. It's just this little thing stuck there, but it's a totally revolutionary statement. So, concepts addressed. Applied ornament, the ordinary. It's a stupid ordinary building. Where do you come off? Corbu would make it heroically in concrete. Mies would make it elegantly in glass and steel. It has no business being heroic. It's an ordinary little suburban office. So what's wrong with making an ordinary suburban office if it's an ordinary suburban office? Then he gets public housing. So this is a church organization. It gets federal funding to do housing for elderly members of their organization. Guild House, Philadelphia. Here's a rendering. Now, this is public housing. go out at the door at Pratt, go left or right on DeKalb, and you get to public housing. Right, we have some right across the street, but that's not public housing. But this is what it looks like. Now, they started doing this in the 1930s. And by 1960, everybody is, can we do better? This is kind of deadly, aesthetically. So they start getting major architects to do public housing. This is Paul Rudolph, Crawford Manor, a couple blocks from Yale. Heroic, muscular, balconies, architectural form. Now, poor Paul Rudolph. Venturi continues to pick on this building for quite a while. After a while, Rudolph said, knock it off. But you see these vertical forms like Kahn's towers. You see the geometric play of the different shaped balconies. It's architecturally rich. Venturi's building is architecturally plain. But turns out there's a lot going on here. First of all, what do old people do? They watch television. So there's a gold anodized antenna up here. And it's a play on the elderly watch television and a sculpture, Richard Lippold, important at the time. And that's decorative. The real antenna's over here. Of course, they're both gone now because you use cable. Then, this arched window, right out of Palladio, Villa Malcontente. He puts a band of white brick here. That means everything above the band is cornice. So we've got all of a sudden an architectural scale. Then he plays games. Ordinary windows, but slightly too big. Cheap red brick, that's how you do public housing. But there's a phrase, 1% for art. So buildings, let's say it's $1 million building, you're supposed to allow $10,000 in the budget for art. Murals in the lobby, sculpture in front of the building, beautify America. So Venturi takes the 1% for art and he makes a solid granite column at the entrance. That's the sculpture. When you come in the building, you just run your hand on it. It's this massive solid granite. And expensive white glazed brick. But then the 1% runs out, so the white brick stops. Now, in addition, he makes excellent apartments. Now, here is Crawford Manor. And I'm going to just very briefly introduce the key concept from next week, the duck and the decorated shed. A duck is a building in which the construction of the building conveys its meaning. A decorated shed is you make a serviceable building and you put a facade on it that announces what its importance. So, Rudolph's Crawford Manor is a duck. Venturi's building is a decorated shed. But let's Go into more about this next week, but let's go back here. If you analyze these apartments, here's a 2-bedroom. Come in. What's the first thing you want to do when you enter the apartment? Put the groceries on the kitchen counter. So here's the kitchen, right here. Come in, closet, dump your coat, kitchen, living room, bedroom, private bathroom, bathroom for the second bedroom, and off the living room. Rudolph's building, I'll go into this more next week. To get these vertical Adobe wants, it's not on your screen, I got Adobe's bugging me. I lost my cursor. Hang on. Let me escape from this. Go back. Okay, my laser pointer. Anyway, Rudolph distorts the apartment. Like you come in here, you got to go all the way to here to get to the kitchen. And the kitchen's got 3 exterior walls, so it'll be freezing in the winter. And there's no wall where you can put furniture. It's window, circulation, circulation. And then he puts a closet. Here's the living room, the closet off the living room. What the hell's the closet doing here? But it gives him his tower. So I'll talk more about that next week. So that's Guild House. Regional context. It looks like the neighborhood. The ordinary. It's not attempting to be a Corbu heroic concrete celebration like Paul Rudolph's. It's just an ordinary public housing building. But there's sophisticated ideas embedded into the ordinary. There's a lot of Palladio here. There's Vitruvius here. There's all kinds of sophisticated things going on embedded into this ordinary. Let me just see how many more I have to go. We're going to take a break, but let me see. Okay. How many want to break now? How many want to break in 15 minutes? Break now. Break in 15 minutes. Okay. So, you go to Washington. There's a Washington monument, a Jefferson Memorial. There's no FDR. So, in 1960, they announced a competition for an FDR memorial. Here is the basin. Here is the Jefferson Memorial. And here's the site. Everybody entered. There's a book of all the entries and all the major architects of the day entered. This was the winner. Now, this was the winner. Here's the problem. Here's the Jefferson Memorial. Where's that come from? Hello? The Pantheon. So up until, this is about 1940, which is kind of late for Beaux-Arts architecture. Up till 1940, monuments, memorials, war memorials were in classical tradition using a Roman vocabulary, as were important buildings. 42nd Street Library, the Metropolitan Museum, Brooklyn Museum, they're all Beaux-Arts buildings. We spoke about Beaux-Arts beginning of the class. We're in the modern era. We're not doing that anymore. Well, what do we do? Well, nobody's happy no matter what we do. But this one, and people said, it looks like tombstones, looks like bookends. And it was so controversial, it never got built. But anyway, this is Venturi's submission. So the problem is how to make an anti-monumental monument. We're not in the mood for monumentality. Right now, at least a couple months ago, people running around tearing down statues that had celebrated things that were admired in the past that no longer are. And the whole idea of a monument or a memorial is very iffy in modern architecture and modern cultural condition. So what does Venturi do? He burns up the landscape. So here's the water, row of trees. You come up, here's the memorial. Here's the parking. And here's another earth burn. Along this surface, now when FDR was at a time of radio, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president during the Depression and then World War II. And he died just before the end of the war. He was famous for his fireside chats. The country was in disarray and danger. To project security, he would speak on the radio. He would sit next to the fireplace in the White House, speak on the radio. People, their families would listen to the radio. So he's known for the words. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. So, engraved along this surface are FDR's words. There's no sculpture of FDR, there's no Roman domes. So here are the words. In back of this is the parking. Vegetation growing on this wall and burned up again. So, didn't win, but it's the only entry we still talk about. What can you think of that got influenced by this? Does this remind anybody of anything? Maya Lin's Vietnam Veterans Memorial. burned up and words along the wall. So Maya Lin, student at the time at Yale, won the competition for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in '82. Now, it was very controversial because it's kind of a downer, just the wall with the names of all the dead people. So, a group of veterans insisted on a more heroic image. So I added, I'm not sure where it is in the site, but added later were the 3 soldiers and then later Vietnam Women's Memorial. So this solution of Venturi, picked up by Maya Lin, has not gained popular acceptance. Though the Vietnam War Memorial is very successful and is visited by a lot of people. So, concept addressed. An anti-monumental monument. Okay, now we're in Boston. This is Boston Public Library, Kim Eden White, sort of like the 42nd Street Library in New York. This is Philip Johnson's addition to the library. This is H.H. Richardson's Trinity Church. This is a building by I.M.P. where the glass pops out. It was exciting. For 5 years, they had to peel all the glass off and put plywood on it until they figured out what to do. And this is Copley Square, which has been sitting there undeveloped for centuries. What to do with this? What should it be? So Venturi says, well, you have a contradiction here. It's an open space. Open spaces are good in a city that's crowded and there's few open spaces. But open spaces are bad because look how these buildings create a wall to the street. Here, it's like a gap. It's like a missing tooth. How do you make a solid wall here and keep it open at the same time? And there's a simple answer. Trees. Trees visually will define the space, define the street, close off the space, but they're totally permeable. You can walk right through them. So he puts up a wall of trees. And just to be perverse, he's got 2 different species of tree, the smaller of which is a scale model of the larger one, to sort of look weird and bother you. So here are the 2 trees. Now, whole series of issues. We want to develop the park, but we want to be able to keep our access. So let's go here. So we want to be able to walk through the park, including diagonally. He's going to reproduce a grid of the city's streets and blocks, and then cut diagonals through, the way Broadway cuts diagonally through Manhattan. But all the blocks are identical, except because of the diagonals, they're all different. Now we've got another issue. Trinity Church is big and irregular. You can't see it all at once. So he makes a scale model of the church, puts it here. So again, nobody even knows what the other entries were. This one didn't win, but it's the only one we talk about. Now, when I asked knowledgeable people why it never got built, the answer was, the trees would screen off your view of the church. You can no longer see the church. So that's a problem. So, a concept addressed. Fundamentals of landscape architecture. You have a square in the city. What do you do with it? And this is widely regarded between this and FDR Memorial are considered two of the best modern architectural landscapes. Okay, Brighton Beach housing competition. So, public housing along the beach in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. So this is the winner, got built. And again, we want to get away from those red brick repeated towers we see in public housing. But what is this? It looks cool. But let's see what Venturi does. Okay, there are people, first of all, the neighborhood is not happy about public housing being dropped in the middle of it, blocking off the beach. So Venturi leaves this street open. The winter closes it off. Venturi leaves it open. So your access to the beach is not disturbed. Then there are studios, 1 and 2 bedrooms in the towers. But then there are 3 bedrooms. 3 bedrooms have a lot of kids. If you have a lot of kids, you want your kitchen at a window where you can look out and see your kids. So the 3 bedrooms are in these little townhouses. They, now as we go down the street, the big blockbuster buildings is set back. What we see are these human-scaled townhouses. So it keeps the life of the street, keeps the scale of the street. It accommodates the needs of the people with the larger families. And it orients views by these diagonal windows and the windows here toward the ocean. So, concepts addressed, human scale and user needs. Now, I've been trying to put other when I'm making a comparison to something else, to have it in my presentation is something I left out, so let's go get it. Let's go to Rockefeller Center. Let's go to images. I'll put it on the screen in a sec. Let's try aerial view. Okay, so here's Rockefeller Center. Here's Fifth Avenue. Now we're putting up the 70-story building. If that were right on Fifth Avenue, it would be out of scale. So, the tall building is set back and up against the street, continuing the scale of the older buildings in Saks Fifth Avenue across the street are 7-story buildings. Now these are separate buildings. These are just wings of this to the International Building. But it puts the human scale against the street and makes the overscale building just backward. It looks cool like that. You don't want it like that. So that's what Venturi is doing. If I can find my cursor. So that's what Venturi is doing here. You're very comfortable walking down the street with these little 2- and 3-story buildings. So it didn't win. And Philip Johnson cast the deciding no vote. So people are annoyed at Philip Johnson. So next we'll do Venturi's mother's house. But let's take a...
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
So, how do you launch your architectural career? And today, enter competitions, do conceptual projects, get grants, do installations. In Venturi's day, enter competitions, do renovations, find a relative who's a sucker to build a house. So we saw competition entries. We saw renovation for Graham's Restaurant. And now we'll see Venturi's mother's house. So, 1964, it's technically the Venturi house, but I always knew it as Venturi's mother's house. Now, Venturi analyzes this house in his book, Complexity and Contradiction, in terms of complexity and contradiction. And we're going to talk later about what that means when we do Venturi's theory. But it's both big and small. This is both a bedroom and a chimney. Here's a window that's too big to be a window, too small to be a door. There's all kinds of games going on. But I'm going to look at it in terms of three kinds of context. So first is historical context. So here's the Low House by McKimmead and White in the Shingle Style. Here's the Chandler House by Bruce Price, Shingle Style house, upstate New York. And here we are, Oak Park, Frank Lloyd Wright's house for himself. And look at how directly it comes from the Chandler house. 2 window bays, 2 bays, Palladian window, Palladian window. And so Venturi's mother's house is in that historical tradition or historical context. Now, just an aside, the major architectural historian of the period was Vincent Scully, just died a couple years ago. And when Frank Lloyd Wright came to, Scully taught at Yale. When Wright came to lecture at Yale, Scully said to him, "What about the influence of the Shingle Style on your early houses?" And Frank Lloyd Wright said, "Son, architecture began when I started putting those houses out on the prairie." So you can't rely on an architect to tell you who their influences are. You have to go to a historian. So that's historical context, which we don't get with European moderns. Locational context. So Venturi's mother's house is in Pennsylvania, outskirts of Philadelphia, the American Northeast. If we look at a suburban house in American Northeast, we get entrance, window with lights. Lights are panes of glass, L-I-T-E-S. Chimney, sloped roof. Venturi's mother's house, we get window with lights, chimney, sloped roof. So it's sort of responding to its locational context. The next one is what I call psychological context. It's my contention that we have embedded in our psyche an image of the house. So you ask any child to draw a house. It's my contention this is what they'll draw. Now, we went over this before, so we'll just reinforce it. So just to demonstrate that, I went to Google Image and I put in the house as any child would draw it, which is a phrase from Louis Kahn. And this is exactly, well, there it is. Now, interestingly, here's something. Notice that the entrance is on the side with the pitched profile. No house does that. The entrance is here, not here. But any child will draw it that way. Now let me just go get an image which can't find my cursor. Here we go. Okay, where's Safari? Oh, it's on this screen. So here we are, 300,000 BC, 200,000 years before the emergence of Homo sapiens, as the hominid ancestors. What do we have? Sloped roof, hearth, the elements that are going to be, here's one, here's our hearth. So 300,000 years is enough time to implant an archetypal image in the mind, which is exactly what Corbu is not doing deliberately, because Corbu and the modern architects are running a revolution. They want to overthrow all traditions. And there were a lot of oppressive traditions before modernism. So the tradition of the conventional house, they're deliberately turning against that. So let's develop that a little more. See who can remember. What's missing from this image? Two things. Every one of them has every one of them. Here's the tree, and here's Venturi's tree. Now, Venturi is a perverse mannerist. Mannerism is a breaking of the rules. So mannerism appears, it goes early Renaissance, high Renaissance, mannerism, Baroque. Mannerism takes the classical rules of the high Renaissance and deliberately violates the rules, including broken pediment. So yes, there's a pediment, but it's broken. Yes, there's a chimney, but it's weird. Oh, by the way, this is Venturi's drawing as a child. So his mother kept it. So Venturi was already doing that when he was 5 years old. So a sunflower is too small to be a tree and too big to be a flower. It's a mannerist tree. In addition, yes, we have an entrance. Here's the entrance. You come down the driveway and thunk, you hit the wall. So you got to go over, and here's the entrance. Thunk, you hit the wall. The entrance is over here. It's perverse. It's there, but it's not there. This is a window with lights, but it's too big. Oh, by the way, what's this? Applied ornament. It's just a piece of molding. You soak it in water, bend it, and nail it to the wall. You're not supposed to do that. No applied ornament. Kahn says the joints are the ornament of the 20th century. Venturi says, no, I'm just going to stick ornament on the wall. So what else is missing? Mommy! There's Venturi's mother in the classical photo of the house. So we get people in some of these. Here we go. Here's a father. Oh, this one has the door in the right spot, but all the others have it at the pediment. Here's the person. So if you want to have fun, just go to Google Image and put in house drawn by a child. So, this is interestingly, there's a lot more to the house. Hang on. There can be many interpretations of a great work of art. So here's a Palladian window from Villa Malcontante. Notice here, the house ends here, and there's an extension of the wall. There's an extension of the wall here and here to make the house look bigger. So the house is too big and too small. This is the upper floor. This is Venturi's bedroom. His mother's bedroom is on the first floor. You come up to the wall and thunk, no door. You have to turn right to get the door. You go up these stairs, thunk, you run into a wall. You have to go around to get up to the upstairs bedroom. So there's all kinds of complexity and contradiction going on. Here are the extended walls to make the house look bigger. Here's the bedroom with the chimney built into it. Here's the living room. Come up the stairs, thunk, you hit the wall. You have to go around there. Chimney's built into this fireplace, built into the stairway. Here's the upstairs bedroom with its Palladian arched window that we also saw in Guildhouse. Now, there's a book. I didn't bring it down. If I can find it, I'll bring it next week. There's a book on Venturi's mother's house. This was a long time in development, and it originated like this: a 9 square of pavilions, very much like Kahn's Trenton bathhouse. So I refer to it as a misstep. This is Venturi not breaking away from Kahn, but staying in that Kahn/modern tradition. And then what happened was he submitted these drawings to the building department, and they said, no way you're going to build that, it's too modern. So he kept working on it and eventually ended up with what has made his career most important building he's done. But it didn't start out that way. There's a whole history of how it evolved. So you would think from the way I described it, he knew exactly what he was doing from the start, but it didn't happen that way. Not only so, concepts addressed. Historical, regional, and psychological context, complexity and contradiction, and applied ornament. There's one more thing I should add. We'll get to it when we do Venturi's theory. Design from image. It's in modernism, we were told, make a functional building. It'll look good. If it's, well, no, it could look terrible. It's going to look the way you design it to look. So be honest about that. So we have a lot more to say about complexity and contradiction. Now, we'll talk more about this in a couple weeks, but where does Venturi fit? He gets called the father of postmodernism. He dislikes the term. He says, no, I'm a modern architect. I don't see it. I think he's a postmodernist. And I'll define postmodernism in a couple weeks. But he does say, I would like to make it plain, I consider myself an architect who adheres to the classical tradition of Western architecture. I think that's true, but modernism doesn't. So I don't think he's a modern architect. We'll get plenty of time to discuss it. So, I just gave you an interpretation of a work that most people would say it's an important work, whether or not it's great, but an important work. Interpretations are infinite. There are other interpretations. In fact, if you look at the book Complexity and Contradiction, he describes it in terms of the house, his mother's house, in terms of complexity and contradiction, in terms of too big and too small, nothing about symbolism, nothing about the slope roof, etc. So when the house was 25 years old, it got an AIA award. The AIA gives an award every year for buildings 25 years old. What do we think of it today, after 25 years? And Venturi gave an address. See if I get my laser pointer back. So he's reflecting upon it. He says, I originally described it as a small building with big scale. When I wrote about it in Complexity and Contradiction, I stressed its mannerism, its complexities and contradictions. 25 years later, now I refer more to its symbolism. So I'm going to say something that may or may not reflect credit on me. I wrote an article on Kahn and Venturi for Art Forum. in which I described the symbolism I just described. When I spoke to Bob, he said, I never thought of it that way. So maybe I get credit for now I refer more to its symbolism. So if you email me, I can get you the original. This is very long, and I had to cut it down to put it in my Philadelphia School book. But some ordinary, extraordinary elements of the pediment, the shelter, the windows, all as sign and symbol. So whether it's Venturi's complexity and contradiction or the symbolic interpretation I just gave, there can be ongoing interpretations. So, any questions or thoughts about Venturi's mother's house? Okay, key idea that we're going to engage with in the next 2 weeks. How does architecture fit with, address ordinary people's lives? And if we look at Corbu's Villa Savoye, we shouldn't put that down, which I tend to do, because we're talking about a time of crowded, dank, dark, unhealthy, unventilated housing. And Corbu is envisioning a modern era of light and air, windows that can open up and let the air move through, sunlight that will kill tuberculosis bacteria and other bacteria, space for people to be expansive and move about. But it's engaged with people's lives. What are people's lives about, and what are the architect's visions of what that life can be? And to this day, we debate tradition versus modernism. If we look at the fractious political climate of the moment, probably the most simple description of it is traditional values versus modern values. Exactly what we see in this slide. So we're going to have plenty more opportunity to talk about that with Venturi's latest work. Any other thoughts? Okay, reminder, the final project is going to be show us one of your design studio projects, which you use my computer and you can. How many people are going to get it from Google Docs? How many people are going to bring it on a flash drive? How many people would get it from Google Docs? How many would use a flash drive? Boy, am I out of date, walking around with a keychain. A bunch of flash drives. I got my whole semester on my keychain. So, got to get with the new technology. So, how was it one of your projects reflective of or not reflective of a key idea of Kahn or Venturi? You might say, Kahn uses structure to organize his architectural spaces. My project does not. Here's how and why. Or my project does. Here's how and why. or Venturi reflects issues of ordinary people in their ordinary lives. Here's how my project does or does not. Anything else? Okay. If you go to YouTube, put in John Lobell, you get my channel. The most recent post is last week's lecture, and I'll put this one up in a couple of days if anybody wants to review it. See you next week.
Thank you.
Somebody do me a favor. One person gather all these books and put them outside my door in room 208 in the small staircase. And somebody carry the fan up and just leave it in front of the door. Thanks.